I always like to start out my programs with a poem. Usually it's a seasonal poem, but given the COVID-19 situation, I thought a particular poem that I want to read is a little bit more appropriate today. It's not so much seasonal as it is just about the benefits of getting out in nature. We often call our natural areas sanctuaries, and I think that's particularly significant now at this time, that I know for me, being out here in a place like the Grassy Pond Conservation Area in Acton really is like being in a sanctuary. So this is called The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go lie down where the wooddrake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. It's the first day of June, and by way of preface, when I was a kid, my father on a nice June day would just look around and go, what is so rare as a day in June? When I was growing up, I heard that line so often from Dad, I thought he invented it. It wasn't until I became an adult that I learned that he'd actually stolen that line from James Russell Lowell. It's part of a long poem called The Vision of Sir Launfal, and it's part of a shorter excerpt from that longer poem titled June, which is how we usually see it today. So I'm going to excerpt a little part of June by James Russell Lowell. And what is so rare as a day in June? Then, if ever, come perfect days. Then heaven tries earth if it be in tune, and over it softly her warm ear lays. Whether we look or whether we listen, we hear life murmur or see it glisten. Now is the high tide of the year, and whatever of life hath ebbed away comes flooding back with a ripply cheer into every bare inlet and creek and bay. Now the heart is so full that a drop overfills it. We are happy now because God wills it. No matter how barren the past may have been, 'tis enough for us now that the leaves are green. We sit in the warm shade and feel right well how the sap creeps up and the blossoms swell. We may shut our eyes, but we can't help knowing that skies are clear and grass is growing. Violets have many leaves, each one so earnestly heart-shaped that you could not imagine the plants have thought of anything else to do. But they have. They make blossoms, which rise yellow or violet in multitudes, the violet ones with violet-colored spurs. They like dampness, they like hillsides, and are comfortable also in the shady woods. They like to be alone or congregated together in the grass, looking up as you pass by, saying, hello, hello. And what else do you imagine they might do? Sing? I don't think so. I suspect they know any further ambition would be unseemly. So all their time is used up in happiness, in becoming the best they can be for the greater glory of... In fact, they know it's okay to rest for the rest of your life just saying thank you. O cast of thousands as are the stars of heaven, thank you. New York fern, Philipterus novaboracensis. And what you'll notice on this fern is that it's widest at or near the middle and tapers to points both at the top and at the bottom. And there's an easy way for me to remember this because I remember that New Yorkers burn their candles at both ends. It also reminds me of a poem by Edna St. Vincent Millay, which is called First Fig. My candle burns at both ends, it shall not last the night, but my foes and my friends, it gives a lovely light. This is the skunk cabbage, Symplocarpus fetidus. This was a plant well known to a local personage from the 19th century you may have heard of, Henry David Thoreau. And Thoreau claimed that the leaf makes the, quote, the best vessel to drink out of a spring. It does not flavor the water, so that that taste and smell from the inside of the leaf, apparently as long as you don't break the leaf, you can use it and make a nice vessel and get some water out of the spring. The American beech, Fagus grandifolia, and we can see a nice large one over there. I want to read from one of my favorite plant books. It's called The Natural History of the Trees of Eastern and Central North America by Donald Culross Peattie. It was written in 1948. Peattie is a naturalist who absolutely loves his subject, and within the subject, one of his favorite trees certainly is the beech, as you'll be able to tell by his introductory paragraph. A beech is, in almost any landscape where it appears, the finest tree to be seen. There are many taller trees and many that attain to moments of showier glory, like the sugar maple in autumnal coloration, or a dogwood starred with snowy blossoms. But taken in all seasons and judged by all that make a tree noble, strength combined with grace, balance, longevity, hardiness, health, the beech is all that we want a tree to be. He goes on and talks about the beech in our history, and my favorite anecdote is this one. An epic line in pure American vein might have been read by all who passed that way until about 1880, remember that date, 1880, on a beech tree on Carroll Creek in Washington County, Tennessee, on the old stage road between Bluntville and Jonesboro. D. Boone, that would be Daniel, the frontiersman, D. Boone killed a bear, on tree in year 1760. And after he inscribed that, that could still be read 120 years later in 1880. This tree finally fell in 1916, the scars of the inscription, but not the exact wording, still visible. The tree was 28.5 feet in girth. Remember that, 28.5 feet around and 70 feet high. And its age was estimated by the Forest Service to be 365 years, so it began to grow in the year 1551. Clethra alnifolia is the scientific name. Summer sweet in the horticulture trade. Also in the old days apparently was called Sailor's Delight. It's a plant that readily grows along the coast, and what they say is that when there was an offshore breeze in the old days of the wooden sailing ships, the breeze could blow the aroma of that summer sweet or sweet pepper bush out of sight of land, so that returning sailors who'd been on voyages of several months could actually smell the sweet pepper bush before they were in sight of land, and that let them know that they were getting pretty close. I mentioned that in the horticulture trade it's sometimes called summer sweet or Clethra, its genus name, but my favorite name for it is the Indian soap, because the leaves contain saponins which will actually produce some lather. And I will just say that we have checked, we're on Acton Town Conservation Land. We checked with Tom Tidman, Acton's Natural Resources Director, just to make sure that it was okay that we picked a few leaves to show you this wonderful quality of sweet pepper bush. Now for this trick I need an assistant. I'm going to call on Susan Mitchell Hart, who's the president of the Acton Conservation Trust. And I just have a handful of sweet pepper bush leaves right here. Nothing up my sleeve, no soap hiding up there. Susan's just going to pour some water onto the leaves, and I'm going to rub and listen as well as look. wonderful. I think it's my favorite plant trick. And these suds really do have a cleansing effect. So, sweet pepper bush, the Indian soap plant. So I have a reading that I'd like to share with you on witch hazel. And this is from The Natural History of the Trees of Eastern and Central North America by Donald Culross Peattie. And this is the conclusion to his two-page chapter on witch hazel. In early days in America, witch hazel was used in local witchery to find water or even mineral deposits. You took a forked branch, one whose points grew north and south, so that they felt the influence of the sun at its rising and setting, and you carried it with a point in each hand, the stem pointing forward. Any downward tug of the stem was caused by the flow of hidden water with a gleam of buried gold. And if there are people still who believe in water witching, theirs is one of the most harmless and pleasing of fallities. And I have to add to that when I was a young boy back in the late 1950s, my grandparents had a piece of property in Milford, New Hampshire that we called the farm. And we used to love to go to the farm. But as the family grew, they needed a second well, and I was lucky enough to be at the farm on the day when the water witch, or dowser, came over to find the location where that well would be drilled. And I walked around with him and was just fascinated as he would walk, and the fork point of the witch hazel would slowly point down to the ground. And say, well, there's some water there, but not enough, or it's too deep. And finally, it seemed magic to me, the point of that witch hazel stick just went right down to the ground, and he said, son, that's where the well is going to be, and that's where it is to this day. This is high bush blueberry, Vaccinium corymbosum. And the Chippewa Indians also used this medicinally. They believed that high bush blueberry, and low bush blueberries as well, provided them with a remedy for craziness. What they would do was that they would take the flowers, the blueberry flowers, place them on hot stones, and inhale the fumes as a remedy for craziness. I tried it 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm much better than I used to be. So the coronavirus is still with us, and I must say I find life much easier to deal with, especially during difficult times, if I can keep it in the day. And for me, that idea is embodied in a poem which has been translated from the ancient Sanskrit, an ancient language of India, which is titled The Salutation of the Dawn. Listen to the exhortation of the dawn. Look to this day. For it is life, the very life of life. In its brief course lie all the truths and realities of your existence. The happiness of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is but a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Such is the salutation of the dawn. Thank you for joining us once again. All the best, and I hope you can join me on a real walk when we're able to get out, when I'm able to get out with a group.